So after printing all of the parts, they're going to some of them are going to print with support material, like the palm, and you can see the support material inside of the slots for the fingers, and also some support material underneath the thumb out and even in some of these holes here. The forearm bars, also you can see the support material, and then on the fingers there's a little flap of material that prints out here. So all this material needs to be removed and then filed to make it smooth so that all the parts will move nicely. Starting with the fingers, this can just be grabbed and snapped off by hand. And then the edge that it leaves behind can be filed and smoothed down with the jeweler's file. So that can be repeated for all of these fingers. So next we have the angled portion of this this forearm bar. Some of it can be removed with the fingernails, or a coarse file. This is a rasp. Has a lot of different surfaces, but I would use the most fine one of these to start by removing a lot of material. Another option for removing this material quickly is to use a pocket knife and to kind of get underneath the layers of the support material and remove it. As you can see, this is actually one of the fastest methods. So you chip away the bulk of the material, and then after you have most of it off, you can go back through with the file and clean it up until it's smooth. For getting into these slots, a pair of needle nose pliers is very helpful for that. You can just sort of grab and twist and remove chunks of material that way. And then again, you can go back through with another tool to clean it up further and to get it all out of all the little crevices. For these holes, the same thing. You can reach in with the tip of the needle nose pliers and remove that material. And you can either use a round file, or you can go in with this and give it a twist and make sure that you get all of the bits and pieces. There's some places here where you can see that there's a bit of support material on the side, and that can just be sanded down. So basically you want to go through and remove all of that material before proceeding to the next step. And some of these areas here too, you'll just have to get in with a combination of pliers and pocket knife and file to get the material out of there. After removing all of the support material, the next thing that you'll want to do is to go through and file and sand any areas where the parts are going to be fitting together and moving to ensure that everything moves smoothly. So for instance, if you insert the proximal phalange here, or the first section of the finger, into the knuckle block, so you'll notice in this instance, you know, as it comes right off the printer, there's some stiffness and friction there. Just like with inserting it into the second section of the finger, you'll feel some friction and stiffness. And another location that will need it is the wrist hinges. You'll notice the way it prints, there's some ridges, so that'll need to be sanded to facilitate that motion. So if we start with just one of the fingers here, and this can be done with the jeweler's file, you want to just take and sand the surface. Okay. So we've sanded the surface a bit on this end where it's going to fit into a finger. So let's select a finger now. And we're going to sand the same surface that's the surface that it's going to come into contact with. And you test fit them together again, and you'll feel the difference there. It makes it a lot smoother. Something that's also helpful is to just, you know, you can just kind of blow with a little air to get all the dust off. Another area that's that helps to sand is this surface here, the rounded part of the finger, which can sometimes hit and make contact with this area of the first finger segment. You'll hear that kind of grinding noise there. So sanding this surface will also help with smooth motion. It's done by just lifting it up, working on the printed layers. And when you sand, you'll notice that you get some material at the edge of, when you file, you'll notice that you get some material at the edge of where you were filing. You can just take your fingernail or your pocket knife blade if you like, and scrape that material that forms off of that edge. Same thing here. So when you fit these parts together and try it again, you get a smoother action. So then you just repeat those steps for all the other fingers, and you'll want to do it to the other side of the first finger segment, the side that fits into the knuckle block. For the knuckle block, you're going to sand in the, again, anywhere where the parts are going to be moving together. So inside these slots like this, from one direction, then flipping over, doing the same thing from the other direction, and then test fitting the parts until you feel that you have a nice fluid motion. So on the wrist hinges, this is one that I already did a little earlier, since you have some layers that need to be taken down, and it's a larger surface area. This is where this tool comes in handy to get a lot of the work done really quickly. And after you've done the majority of the work, you can go through with a more fine file and continue to work it down. And as you go, you just kind of check and feel how it moves against the other surface. Next, we're going to look at assembling each of the fingers with their corresponding snap pin. So what you want to do is you want to test, and first test fit one of the pins to one of the holes in the first finger segment. Now, ideally, when you hold the pin and you just kind of flick it with your finger, gravity should return it down to normal very smoothly. So when I printed out these on my printer, for instance, this is a hole that I've already modified. This hole here is as it prints, and it's very stiff, and it doesn't move smoothly. So I'll pull it back out of there with the pliers. So to fix that, you go to your set of drill bits, and you find one that is just slightly too large to fit through the hole. So this is the hole that I've already drilled. You'll notice it fits through nicely now. But so you find a bit size that's just slightly too large, and then you'll drill out that hole so that the pin then is very smooth. Okay, so now I have my my drill bit in. I'm just going to hold this flat and very tightly, of course. And it's very quick. You probably just need to make one quick pass at it, and then put the pin in. And it looks like we still have a few little scraps of material in there, so we'll just clear those out. And after drilling it, it makes a makes for a very smooth motion between the pin and the finger segment. Okay, so you're going to want to go through and repeat that same process for drilling out the holes for each one of your finger segments. Don't drill the holes out on the fingertips though. You want those to stay the size that they are, because then it facilitates a really tight fit for the pin to help it stay in place after you've installed it. So now we'll go ahead and install one of the pins into one of the fingers. So you line them up, take your pin, and push it through the first hole. A scrap piece of wood is useful, or doing this on a table that you don't really care about, because then you can turn it over, put the pin head against the wood, and then push down really firmly until the tip of the pin head comes through the other side. And then after you've done this, you'll notice that at first this doesn't fall extremely smoothly, or well, I guess in this case it does, but if it doesn't, you can kind of apply pressure, just a little bit of pressure, as though you were going to, you know, try and snap them in half in this direction. A little bit of pressure, and then work it back and forth. And you'll hear that kind of grinding noise, a little bit of pressure this way. So that's the PLA plastic rubbing against itself, and that's a way to clear out any other little bits and pieces that are keeping it from moving smoothly. So when you're done, what you should have is a fingertip that just falls very naturally and easily via gravity, but also doesn't have a lot of wiggle back and forth. So we'll go through and we'll do this to all the fingertips, and then move on to installing it into the knuckle block. Okay, with all of the fingers assembled, we can move on to attaching them to the palm. One last area that you might want to do a little filing and sanding on is at the leading edge of the knuckle block, the rounded portion, and just taking a large file and sanding along there, for the same reason that we sanded this surface of the fingertip, because this rounded portion here might rub against this portion here depending on the print. So you just want to check and make sure that you have a nice smooth movement on all of these. And then you'll want to set aside the thumb. So the thumb is going to be the thickest of all the fingers. And then you can set these up in terms of their length. So we're doing a left-handed Talon this time. So the longest of the fingers is going to be the middle finger. The next shorter two are the index and ring finger. So the index and ring finger. And then the smallest of them, of course, is the pinky. So that's the order that they're going to go in there. So I'll set some of these off to the side. Okay. Then you're going to take your two long snap pins, and these are going to be the pins for the knuckle block. You may need a hammer to use to very lightly tap the pins into place. Also, you'll notice that the tip of the pin is slanted and has a hole in it. That hole is so that if you need to replace a finger down the line, you can screw in a little eye screw and use that to pull the pin back out. So to start this, the slanted portion of the pin tip should be in line with the taper of the palm. So this would be correct, that would be incorrect. So it's just going to be like that. You can go ahead and get it started by just by hand, by pushing it in so that you've got it partway through there. You can keep pushing until it's almost sticking out through the hole and into the first slot. Then we'll take the index finger, put it in there, and then with our hammer, we're going to lightly tap to start seating the pin. Okay, so as you can see, that pin is through the first finger. So we're going to keep tapping this into place until we get until its depth is about to where the tip is almost sticking out of this hole. Okay, and then we'll take and put the middle finger in. As you can see with this first one, before we go ahead and do the middle finger, you'll see that because of the sanding and everything that we did, this finger just falls with gravity. It has a very smooth motion to it. So next we'll put in the middle finger. The easiest way to do this is just to get it into a position where you can hold it into place with the knuckle block. If needed, you could use some painter's tape to hold it there while you do this. But okay, so we're most of the way there. So we're just going to keep going and tap it until it's all the way in. And there we go. So we have the pin in place. After putting the pin in, it might actually tighten the finger slots. So you just kind of, like we did when we assembled the fingertip, you can grab the frame, put a slight bit of pressure on it in terms of bending it, you know, in this direction, and work the finger back and forth, and that'll help it to start loosening back up. Okay, and as you can see, after doing that, then it moves nice and freely, both of these fingers. So now what we'll do is we'll flip this over and repeat the process with the other side. You'll notice that this board isn't thick enough to keep any pressure from hitting the thumb mount when you're hammering. So you'll either want to put in another board until the thumb mount does not contact the surface of the table, or you can move the board to the edge of the table and do it there. You just want to make sure that when you're hammering, there's no stress being applied to the thumb mount, because you could risk breaking that. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'll repeat the process with that pin and these two fingers. So now that we've repeated that step, we have all 4 fingers installed, and as you'll see, they just open and close via gravity very smoothly. So that the individual fingers should all move freely, so that there's as little friction as possible. The next step is going to be to install the thumb. And for that, we're going to use a Chicago screw. Since the thumb doesn't have the advantage of being surrounded by the knuckle block, we're going to actually use some metal hardware in there to make sure that it facilitates a very strong and secure connection. Okay, so now we're going to attach the thumb using a Chicago screw. These are also, depending on the hardware store that you go to, like my local hardware calls this end of it a rivet nut, but this is also referred to as a Chicago screw. So this will act as the axle for the thumb, and we'll go through the thumb mount here. So depending on where you go for your hardware, I wasn't able to find one that was quite small enough for the hole. So that being the case, you know, you'll want to go ahead and go from your drill bits, find one that's a match to the diameter of the shaft. And then, kind of like we did for the first finger segments, you can modify the thumb mount hole to be large enough to accommodate the Chicago screw. So after drilling the holes out a little bit larger, you'll want to go back through with your file or your pocket knife, remove any of the little excess bits of plastic. There we go. Okay, so this will go through one end like that, out the other end like so. So we'll slide the thumb in, make sure that everything's moving smoothly. And we'll go ahead and seat that. Then you can just make sure that it's moving fluidly. Then on the other end, we'll put a washer, and then the screw. And for this, you don't want to actually tighten this down really hard, because what that'll do is it'll squeeze the thumb mount together and then lead to the thumb not moving smoothly anymore. Instead, after you've made sure that this is to your liking and moving smoothly, you want to use a little bit of Loctite on the threads to hold it in place. So let's do that real quick here. After that, you can just unthread this most of the way, and then just apply a little bit of the Loctite right there on the threads. Okay, so we have some Loctite on there, and then just rethread it. And then just tighten it down just until it's snug. Actually, that was a little bit too far. So you just want it to be tight enough that it's holding everything together, but not so tight that it impedes this from moving. Also, I forgot to mention, if you want the option to be able to take this back apart later for maintenance or something, get the removable Loctite as opposed to permanent. Okay, so next step, prior to doing the cabling and bungees for the fingers, we're going to attach the cable guide to the back of the hand. This is going to be using little stainless steel Phillips head screws. Now, for finding the correct sized hardware for all of this, because these files are going to be scaled to fit a specific person. If you're just doing a one-off, if you're building this for one individual, what I would recommend is taking, print out the parts, take them with you to the hardware store so that you can size them appropriately. For instance, for this screw, we're going to want one, as you can see, like you can hold it up the side and see that it's enough to go all the way through the cable guide and then bite into the plastic of the palm. But see, there's another hole on the other side here, which is going to be for our leather palm plate later. And you want to be able to screw into that from the other direction. So that's why this one just goes part way into that hole to leave room for a screw to come from the other direction. So for this, and also as far as the thickness of the screw, you want something that's going to be thick enough that the threads are going to bite into the wall of the hole. So what we'll start by doing is putting in 4 screws and threading them until they're just sticking out slightly. So let's turn this a couple more times here. Okay, so now we have the tip of the screw sticking out, and that will make it easy for us to align this. So I'm going to go ahead and do that 3 more times. Alright, so I have the 4 screws started with just the tip sticking out, and that way they'll just kind of lay into exactly where they need to go. And then the idea is to just finish off screwing them in. So that's installed there, and you can see it's in place firmly. Now we're going to move on to adding elastic to the fingers to keep them in their open position. For this, I'm actually going to construct a tool. So I'm going to show doing this. For the cables that I'm going to do later, I'm using this Power Pro microfilament braided fishing line. It's used for fly fishing, non-stretch. This is 80-pound test line. It can be found at a lot of sporting goods stores. And it's it's an abrasion-resistant, very strong material. So in addition to using this for the cables to close the fingers, you can also use it to make a tool that makes threading the elastics a lot easier. Because some of these holes for the elastics can be hard to guide the elastic through. So I'll take a length of it, about twice as long as my palm, let's say. So about a loop about that long, and cut it off there. This can be pretty difficult to cut unless you have really sharp scissors, so you know, I often just use a knife or in this case a little razor blade. After cutting the length, match up the two ends and fold it. Here, I'm going to do this over the wood so that it can be a little easier to see. Fold it in half and then crease it at the end. What this does is it makes a little loop, but this line is stiff enough that you can pass it through a hole in order to then pull back through pull the elastic back through that hole. So I'm going to show that to you now. For the length of the elastics, you want it to be long enough to have a knot in the end so that it doesn't pull through, and then extra on this end to be able to tie it off. So I'm going to make a length about that long just to be safe. So we'll start by making 2 of these lengths for the first 2 fingers, because we're going to tie the slack of these off together on the underside of the hand. Okay. So now we're going to do a double knot in the ends of these, like so. Okay, I'm going to cut our extra off so that it doesn't get in the way later. Okay. So this is where this tool comes in handy. Let's start with our index finger. We're going to come through into the slot here. Just push through until the loop comes out through the other end. So you can see the loop here. And you can open that up. Take one of your lengths of elastic, and you know, about that far, you know, about as long as the fingertip. Put that amount of length through, pull back on the loop until it starts to pull it through the hole. Wrap this around your finger, and then give it a nice firm pull, and that'll pull it through that first hole. Then you can take and tighten this down and kind of guide it into the hole there. Give it a tug. And now it's seated inside the hole. The second pathway through the first finger, you know, the first finger segment, that's much easier to pass the elastic through. So I found that this tool isn't really necessary for it. And so you just keep the finger straight. Push it through, and it'll come out of the hole on the back here, and you take up the slack. So you'll notice now that if I just hold this down with my finger, that it very smoothly returns up. So next we're going to repeat this same process with this finger. Now, to finish this part of the process off, you can take your 2 lengths of elastic cord and tie it off here. And this is where there's there's 2 options really. You can either tie it off right here if you're wanting to keep the elastics out of the way as much as possible, or you can buy a little eye screw and screw it into the frame somewhere, you know, like here or even into this block here, and then tie it back to there. Peter and Peregrine, the father and son team that developed the changes to the basic design that resulted in the Talon, have found that moving the cable anchoring point back here seems to make the opening motion of the fingers smoother. So it's kind of a personal preference thing as to whether you tie it here or anchor it somewhere else. This is the more simple method, so that's what I'm just going to demonstrate here. And as far as the amount of tension, you want to kind of take up the slack until the fingers return to their neutral position on their own. So once you have the right amount of tension on the line, you finish off your knot. Just a basic square knot is fine. Okay. So you see that now these can move down and return to neutral. And then let's put one more hitch in the knot. Okay. And we can cut off the excess. And repeat these steps for the next two fingers. And then I'll show you doing the same with the thumb. The thumb will be a little different because it has its own anchoring point right here for the elastic, as opposed to tying off to another piece. So as I was doing the pinky on this one, the channel, the pathway for the elastic on this finger is a little tighter. So I just thought I'd show a way to get past that if you run into it. So something to solve that problem is to use a pair of pliers to better grip the tool that we made out of fishing line. So you have it already started. You grip it with the teeth of your pliers. Grip really firmly so that it won't slip. And that'll give you a better grip to pull it through. On the thumb, the only difference is going to be that the cable, as you can see, sorry, the elastic, as you can see, goes through a hole on the side here. And before you tie it off, you want to get the tension adjusted so that the thumb returns to its neutral position very easily. And this is where using something like a jeweler's file is helpful, so you can get underneath and then guide the elastic back up, like so, and then guide it through. So let's get this back open so we can guide it through there. On this one I probably cut the elastic a little short, which is making it hard to tie the knot, but so we can tighten so right now it's a little too loose, so you can grab one end of the loop here and tighten it up. And you just keep doing that until you reach the point where it returns to its neutral position on its own. Once you have that, you kind of cinch it down, pass it through again, like so, and put the second hitch in to tie off the knot. Okay, so now, so actually that'll need a little bit more tightening. There we go. Okay, so there we have, and I like to tie it so that the knot is over on this side, and then what we'll do later is we'll use a little bit of glue to secure that there. That just gives it a little bit more length so that it makes for a smoother return pull. So now we have all of our elastics in. Before moving on to stringing the fingers, now that we have the tension adjusted on the elastics, I'm going to just use a little bit of super glue and apply a bead of super glue to the knots of the elastics. And what this will do is this will just help to really to secure these knots and prevent them from coming loose or untying. We'll also do this to the thumb here.
and then we can just let that dry.
Now we're going to run the control cables for the fingers. For that I'm going to use what I showed earlier, which is this Power Pro microfilament braided fishing line. It's a 80-pound line. And then also I'm going to use some of the scrap elastic for this process. The reason for using the scrap elastic is that we're going to cut it into little pieces and then tie the end of the fishing line that's going to be in the tip of the finger. We're going to tie that around the little piece. The reason being that just tying this into a knot makes a knot that's small enough that it'll actually pull through that hole. Tying it around a little bit of material gives extra thickness to the knot to prevent that from happening. So I'm going to use my razor blade because I like to work with that. You could use a pair of sharp scissors for this as well. And I'm just going to go through and create 5 little chunks of the elastic material. And it doesn't have to be the elastic either. You could you could use scraps of leather or just any other little bit of material that you can then tie the fishing line around. For the length on the cables, you'll just want to leave yourself a lot of excess on the other side, a lot of slack, so that later on, when it's time to tie it to the tensioner, you'll have a lot of material to work with. So I'm probably going to go ahead and extend it out about that far. So after I've figured out my length, an easy way to just measure this out real quick is to go to the end of that length, fold it, measure out the next length of it, and repeat that until you have 5 lengths stacked on top of each other. So now that gives me 5 lengths of fishing line. Alright, so let's flip this over here. I'm going to start by grabbing one of these pieces of elastic. Go ahead and start my knot, and I'm just not going to tighten it all the way. I'm going to leave a little loop there that's just a little bit larger than my elastic. That way I can slide the elastic into there and then tighten it down. So we'll do that here. Okay. Then I can tighten that down and then put another hitch in it to complete the knot. Okay. And I like to put a third hitch in just in case. Alright. There we go. And then after doing that, put this down on the board. And I'm just going to trim off the excess bit of fishing line there. Okay. So now I'm going to take and let's start with the index finger here. It's going to go through the hole in the tip of the index finger. And you'll see, I don't know if it can be seen on the camera really easily, but you know, if you get a nice straight shot, it should go all the way through. Here we got it bowing up a little bit, so it went all the way through. Or what you can do is, if you like, is you can get it through the first part, reach in there with a knife blade, or in this case I'm using a jeweler's file, and just go ahead and pull it all the way through the fingertip. So you'll notice that this will pull in, and there we go, and it keeps it from pulling further. Then we can go through the second finger segment, and again lift that up. Okay, and then next we're going to oh, and pardon my cell phone making a noise there. Next we're going to go through a cable channel that's inside the knuckle block. It's one that comes out, you can kind of see it right there. It's these holes. So you find that hole and guide your fishing line through the hole there. It'll come out the other side, and go ahead and pull it tight. Okay, so now you see if I pull this cable, it activates the finger. And then you'll want to put it through its corresponding hole on the cable guide. The first hole here is for the thumb, second hole is for the index finger, and so on. Oh, I accidentally looped the pinky while I was doing that. There we go. Okay. So now it's through the cable guide as well. And this will lead back to the, later this is going to anchor to the tensioner. And so there we have our index finger attached. So now we're going to repeat this process for all the other digits. So now all of the fingers have their cables through them. Something that I'm going to do to help just help keep the cables nicely locked into the fingertips is I've just got a common crafting hot glue gun, and we'll take and go to each fingertip, put a little bead of hot glue into the hole that the cable goes into. Then using something like a cold piece of metal like this pocket knife blade, I'm going to hold it on there for a few seconds to flatten the glue. You want to hold it for a few seconds until the glue cools down enough that it's not going to stick to the blade of the knife, and that flattens off the surface of the hot glue.